Righty-ho, so we're going to think about the importance of ambition for Lady Macbeth and Macbeth. Remember, we're focusing on their initial reactions to ambition, so we're focusing on Act 1. And we really want to think about the emotional effects of ambition, the psychological effects of ambition, and even the physical effects of ambition, how ambition affects their relationship as well. So the first thing that we want to think about is, in a 17th century context, how would ambition be viewed? So here what you want to bring in is your contextual information about life in the 17th century, in particular the idea of a very regimented, very ordered existence in the 17th century. We want to think about that great chain of being and how everyone and everything has their place in the great chain of being, the great chain of being, and look at your quotations in relation to this. If everything has its place, then ambition is an emotion that is in some way rebellious, it's unwelcome, it is not looked upon as a positive force in the way that it would be today, because ambition is standing against the idea of order and the idea of control, the idea that one person can excel, or that one person can leap beyond the ordered existence that is set for them, is something that would not be looked upon favourably in the 17th century. Also, the idea of female ambition is abhorrent in the 17th century. If you remember our quotation, I think it's the Mary Herbert quotation, about the only ambition for a woman at that time was to be a wife and to be a mother. Therefore, for Lady Macbeth to have an ambition that goes beyond that is unnatural, and helps to link her to the idea of evil and the idea of witchcraft. So ambition is a central core to 17th century life, in that it is not welcome. Ambition in 21st century life is the opposite of that. Ambition is a driving force, it's a motivational tool, it's something that we see as a quality to be fostered in the young. So keep that in mind. Right, let's move on. Okay, so what's important about Macbeth's introduction? So this is Act 1, Scene 2, and Macbeth is introduced as a warrior here. So the sergeant says, "For brave Macbeth." Now, think of that epithet. Now, the epithet is the name that goes along with Macbeth. So he's brave Macbeth. Well, he deserves that name. "Disdaining fortune, and with brandished steel, which smote with bloody execution, like Valier's million carved out his passage." So Macbeth is brave as a soldier, everything that he should be. He's a soldier for King Duncan as well as being his cousin, and in the battle against the Norwegians, he showed no regard for his own safety or for the idea of luck, and instead he used his sword, his brandished steel. Nice metaphor there. Metaphor, remember that, folks, because we need to identify techniques as well. The metaphor for his sword there. But also that's a metaphor for himself, isn't it? He's brandished steel. He's a warrior. He's in control. He has no emotion at that moment other than loyalty to the king. And what he did was he carved out his own passage. Again, that's another metaphor. So he carved out his own way. He produced a performance where he carved out his own fortune, actually through the bodies of others. So he is someone who is self-willed in that respect. Now remember, being self-willed is not necessarily a good thing at this time, but everything here is a credit to Macbeth, because he is being loyal, he is being brave, he is being a warrior. They are all attributes to someone who is loyal to their king, but also they're all masculine attributes. He's being everything that a man of that time should be. And he's rewarded. Look what Duncan says. Look how emphatically Duncan says, "O valiant cousin, worthy gentleman." So you've got the familial bonds there and the social viewpoint there too. So he is doing everything he should as a family member and as a loyal servant to the king, and he's doing everything as he should in relation to being a man and making clear his masculine qualities to fit into society's view of what masculinity should be at the time. So just to go over that again, look at the epithet there. Values his masculine qualities, his strength is acknowledged. Now that's important because his strength is something that is attacked by his wife later on. Ambition is used as a tool to attack his strength when his strength is lacking. And we'll see that in Act 1, Scene 7. The metaphors there: direct comparison, disdaining fortune carved out. So he's no regard for luck, chooses self-reliance. Now, again, that is something that in this context is positive, but self-reliance is not going to be seen positively when ambition and when it sort of coalesces with ambition, when it comes together with ambition. Self-reliance and ambition, well, what do they lead to? They lead to rebellion and anarchy and treason. So they're not looked upon as positive forces when they come together. So he carves his own path to glory, a route which strengthens the social hierarchy here, but doesn't strengthen the social hierarchy when he decides to carve his own path to glory towards kingship. So when that path to glory deviates from what society sees as normal, from what religion sees as acceptable, then it doesn't strengthen the social hierarchy, but instead it breaks it. You've got that simile like Valor's minion. So he's a servant to courage and to his king. He's willing to risk his life to fulfill his duty. All excellent attributes now in Act 1, Scene 2. But what he does then is he doesn't become Valor's minion. He becomes ambition's minion, doesn't he? Ooh, ambition's minion. Minion. He becomes ambition's minion in Act 1, Scene 5 and Act 1, Scene 7. And then those exclamations, I don't know why I can't see all of that, I'm not quite sure. Again, societal and familial bonds are recognised by King Duncan and recognised by Macbeth. So before ambition makes its presence felt, the bonds are secure and they're recognised by Macbeth and by Duncan. Okay, so let's see what happens then in Act 1, Scene 3 when he comes across the witches, and what's significant about Macbeth's reaction to the prophecy, thou shalt be king hereafter. Remember, initial reactions to the prophecy, they're what we are focusing upon today. So Banquo says, good sir, why do you start? So he's startled, he starts, he makes some sort of physical movement and seem to fear, so facial gestures let us know that he seems to fear things that do sound so fair. My noble partner you greet with present grace and great prediction of noble having and of royal hope, that he seems rapt, enraptured, fixated. So there are physical reactions here that make it seem as if Macbeth is completely and utterly stunned by what he hears, that he shall be king thereafter. So let's look at those a little bit more. Okay, so again, these are our techniques, folks, and we have to talk about techniques. So, question, why do you start? Banquo's question, why do you start? So the witch's prophecies make Macbeth physically jump. He's startled by the idea of the impossible becoming reality. Now, you could say that anybody would be startled by that. But then what we have here is a culmination of things that perhaps make us view Macbeth in a less positive light, because you've got the epithet, noble partner, you've got the irony, and you've got physical description. Now the irony is he's noble partnering, but is he a noble partner when he's already contemplating, because we know that he's startled by immediately fixating on the idea of how can he become king? So you've got these positive epithets at the second one. Do you remember we had brave Macbeth, now we have noble partner. We also, beg your pardon, we had valiant cousin and worthy gentleman, so that's 4. My maths isn't so great there. So we have that epithet, and what it does is it flatters the integrity of Macbeth, takes for granted the integrity of Macbeth. But here's where the irony comes in, because just when Banquo is taking for granted the integrity of Macbeth, what's Macbeth doing? In his mind, he's immediately contemplating how he can become king. Oh, I'm going to have to kill Duncan. So what he does is he is at that point considering committing the ultimate betrayal. The verb rapt. So this is that he's enwrapped, that he's undergoing rapture, that he's completely and utterly lost in that thought. So the idea of being completely absorbed, it's physicalized, it's apparent in some way for for Banquo to pick up on that. So he's entranced by the idea of breaking through the restrictions placed upon him by society, to the point where that is seen and recognized by Banquo. So it's not as if there isn't that idea that he is in complete that he's horrified, but he's rapt by it, which perhaps suggests more of a positive reaction than a negative one. Okay, so then we have Macbeth himself. He speaks for himself now. How does Macbeth react? How does Macbeth's reaction betray his latent or his hidden ambition? So he says, "Stay, you imperfect speakers." That's going to be important. That imperative is going to be important. "Tell me more." So he wants to find out more about that. And then again, you've got another imperative. Say, okay, "Speak, I charge you." Of course, what do the witches do? They vanish. So let's look at the importance of those imperatives. Okay, so "stay, speak, and I charge you." He is commanding with his imperatives. He's commanding the witches to do his bidding. So despite the treasonable aspects of the witches' prophecies, and remember, to speak treason, that's a hideous thing to do. And Macbeth desires to hear more. So he doesn't try to stop them, but he wants to hear more. Now, why would you want to hear more of a bad thing? Obviously, you don't see it as a bad thing. And so his immediate reaction should have been to silence them, because that's what society would expect. Everybody has their place. And remember, this is all to do with an attack on the divine right of kings. The divine right of kings. So look at your PowerPoint for that, folks, your quotations rather, in relation to that. So in relation to the divine right of kings, he should have silenced them, but he doesn't. He does the opposite. He prioritizes his desire to know all. And again, that's about self-will, isn't it? That's about seeing himself as an individual who's in a position where he can gain some advantage. So ambition makes him selfish. Ambition highlights him as an individual, not as someone whose job it is to safeguard the king, not as someone who's part of a family, not as someone who's part of a society, not as someone who's part of a hierarchy, not as someone who's in a great chain of being, but an individual who wants his own thing. And therefore what he does, he prioritizes that desire. He should have been chastising them because of their audacious, they're completely and utterly unacceptable predictions, and yet he wants to know more. Ooh, bad boy that he is. Okay, so let's think about this, the ambitious thoughts. So physical reactions and psychological effect then upon Macbeth. Remember, these are the key things, all to do with ambition. So why does ambition bring about such changes? So remember, this is an aside. So this is his soliloquy. Soliloquy. Okay, use that technical term. So this is his soliloquy. He's speaking his own thoughts and feelings to himself, but the audience get to hear. Nobody else on stage does. So he says, "Two truths are told as happy prologues to the swelling act." The swelling act is the idea of being king, of the imperial theme. So think about that metaphor. Then he breaks out of the soliloquy to say, "I thank you, gentlemen," and then says, "Cannot be good, cannot be ill. If ill, why hath it given me earnest of success, commencing in a truth?" So let's look at the importance of the language here. Right, let's think about that metaphor, the swelling act of the imperial theme. So what is he thinking about? What is the direct comparison of the swelling act of the imperial theme? What's the underlying meaning? It is the killing of Duncan. Now that is a sacrilegious act. That is a treasonable act. And therefore, to call something which is so hideous, so abhorrent, so unacceptable, the swelling act of an imperial thing, it sanitizes it. It takes the unacceptable nature, and it's almost euphemistic, really, isn't it? It's that idea that this is something that's so hideous we can't talk about, so I'm going to refer to it with this metaphor. And in doing that, it sanitizes what is blasphemous and what is treasonable. To usurp the idea of taking the crown, not winning it, not being allocated it, but taking it, stealing the crown, which is completely abhorrent, completely against divine right, completely against the social order. But that idea that Macbeth can take the crown is viewed as a swelling act, suggesting an idea that is growing or evolving into action. So it's swelling, so it's growing. So like there it is, and then it's getting bigger and it's getting bigger and it gets bigger and bigger, and then it takes over, just like that. Wonderful drawing. So what it is, it's something that's growing and it's something evolving rather than just an idea. So again, ambition makes him think about action. So ambition just doesn't drive his thoughts, but it makes him think about his deeds. It's taking root, despite the fact that he himself knows that it cannot be purely positive. He says cannot be good, cannot be ill. it's not positive. Everything about society and everything about his culture and everything about his religion is telling him this is the wrong thing to think about. And yet, look, it's still growing, it's still evolving. So he goes on and he says, I am Thane of Cawdor, if good. Now look at this. If good, why do I yield? Why do I yield? Yield means to give in. Why do I give in to that suggestion whose horrid image doth unfix my hair and make my seated heart knock at my ribs? Look at the physical reactions there. And again, I like the fact that he says against the use of nature. So he knows that this is against everything that is natural. And again, there's that word murder, such an important word, because that's what he's contemplating, is yet but fantastical. So even when he thinks about it, it has this horrific physical reaction. But he knows that it is yet but fantastical. That implies that it will be more than that. Okay. Oh, look. That's cut off. I don't know why that is, folks. Anyway, here we go. So think about here, the descriptive language used focuses in a very overtly dramatic way the impact of the treason. You know, that idea that his heart is beating against his ribs, that his hair is unfixed, hair standing up. All of these things show that his body is rejecting what his mind is yielding to. So there is a contrast between physical and psychological, or physical and emotional reactions here. The physical reactions are telling him to not even contemplate it, but his emotional or psychological reaction is telling him that he's going to yield to this. So the idea of harming the king, which is only a supposition, it's only an idea, it's described as fantastical, and yet it has this very obvious physical and mental effect upon him. But his language betrays him because he uses the word murder, and he knows that it's against nature, and yet he instinctively turns towards the new horrors. And again, Banquo can recognise that in his features. So everything that he knows is wrong everything that he knows is wrong is making itself apparent in his body, and yet he still focuses on trying to capture this ambitious dream. Because it's the soliloquy, it's delivered from a side, it's heard only by himself, therefore he's being honest. His body rejects the swelling act, but his mind is making him consider it. And again, Banquo uses that verb rapt to show how transfixed, how lost in thought Macbeth is. So this thought is swelling and growing and evolving and taking over Macbeth's mind. And there's that, look how our partner's rapt, second time that has been used in relation to Macbeth. If chance will make me king, why chance may crown me without my stir, and new horrors come upon him. So the physical effect upon Macbeth, his face is distorted, he looks as if he's undergoing some horror, and yet he does not stop these thoughts that are horrific. Okay, so we need to take all that and build it into a paragraph, like Ed Sheeran and his Lego house. So if you have a little look through here, it tells you the key thing is, guys, 7.5% of this essay is related to your contextual information. So whatever points you're making, you must use context and a contextual quote to validate those. So it's not just assertion, try to use it. So if you look through, oh, that's cut off. I don't really know why that's cut off. But what you can see is how we're starting to layer the paragraphs, that we bring in all aspects of Peter. Okay, so we've got our point sentence, we've got our evidence, and our evidence will be from the text, and our evidence will be a social context quote. We need to identify a technique in what we've taken from the text. We analyse the impact of that technique in relation to ambition and relation to how it would have been seen in the 17th century, and then we bring it back either to the 17th century audience or to the 21st century audience. Okay, so not going back specifically to a reader, but to an audience member in the 17th century or an audience member in 2017. Remember, folks, the divine right of kings. You've got this great quotation. You can pick and choose from that quotation to validate anything that we've said in relation to Act 1, Scene 2 there, and Macbeth's attack on the divine right of kings. And therefore, you need to work on your first paragraph there. So the first paragraph might be about ambition, how it overrides the concept of the divine right of kings. You can use any part of this quotation and then any of those quotations that we've looked at in Act 1, Scene 2 and Act 1, Scene 3. Okay, so you get going with your paragraphs. Super dupe.